Before we get started, just a quick update for the podcasting community in academia and higher education. Higher Ed PodCon is in Cleveland in July this summer. And for year 2, we've expanded to 2 full days of sessions, conversations, and practical discussions focused entirely on podcasting in higher education. We have over 30 speakers lined up from the US, Canada, UK, and even Italy. I am really excited about the diversity of voices from a broad range of institutions speaking at PodCon this summer. We have our full list of sessions on the website. Early registration is still open. We've worked really hard to keep the cost of attending as reasonable as possible. Registration actually includes breakfast and lunch both days. And you'll see we've negotiated some super affordable hotel rates nearby. So please join us July 16th and 17th. You can learn more and register at higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Hope to see you there.
I think you're hitting that demographic that can be hard to reach with public outreach. I mean, they're working, they have young families, they're busy, but guess what? They have a commute, so they can listen on their commute. So we're meeting them where they are, essentially, rather than asking them to put one more thing on their calendar that they have to do.
Welcome to Continuing Studies, a podcast for higher education podcasters who want to learn, connect, and get inspired. I'm Neil McPhedran, founder of higheredpods.com and Podium Podcast Company.
And I'm Jennifer Lee, founder of JPod Creations. If you're podcasting in higher ed, you're not alone. There's a fast-growing community out there, and we're here to help you tap into it.
Yes, we are, Jen, and we want to hear from you. Send us your ideas. You want to be on the show? Let us know. We'd love to have you. Jen, today we are chatting with 2 people I met at PodFest in Orlando. I just love going to these conferences and doing a little meetup of other higher education podcasters, and then from there, lining up a few people to come onto our show. And this is just that. So today we are chatting with Tristan Harrenstein and Barbara Clark. They're both the hosts and everything, actually, almost, for the Archaeology Books for Fun podcast. And the show has the best tagline, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. And it just says a lot about the personality of this show. So Archaeology Books for Fun podcast is quite a different style, actually, than we've chatted with. It's a book club style podcast. And as the title suggests, it's dedicated to making archaeology accessible and enjoyable for everyone.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they just stated that archaeology books for fun. I like it. I understand what I'm going to get from this podcast because there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to their topic. And I know we talk about it as well. Either some people think it's a little sleepy or other people have it glamorized. Like I remember watching back in the day, Relic Hunter, where the woman is hunting the relics and you think it's super fun. But I like the fact that they actually teach us the proper stuff when it comes to archaeology.
Yeah, totally. What's really unique about this podcast versus anyone else we've interviewed so far on Continuing Studies, they use this book club style that isn't an interview podcast. And I think actually whatever field you're in, do listen to it, because I think this is a really interesting style of podcast that an academic can use in whatever field they're in. So anyway, let's get into it, Jen. Welcome, Barbara and Tristan. So great to have you here on this episode of Continuing Studies.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So we met actually in person at PodFest in January. We met at one of those little meetups. It was really nice to get to know you. And so I was like, I got to get you on the Continuing Studies podcast. And here we are, Jen.
I'm glad Neil's doing some heavy lifting now. You're doing my role because usually Neil says I'm like the networking queen. So I'm out there always at all the conferences bringing people in.
Yeah.
So your podcast, Archaeology Books for Fun. Why don't we just
Love
start
the
there?
title.
Yeah, it's such a great title. There's some good branding as well, too, and I really want to get into that. But maybe let's just start with, what's your origin story?
Tristan, I'll let you have this one.
All right. So we work for the Florida Public Archaeology Network. So we do outreach and education about archaeology, the past, and science. We work with all ages, and we typically end up working with kids to seniors, and we often miss the working age adults in between. And so part of the reason for this was we want to reach that audience that we don't typically reach very easily. But we just thought, let's try it and see how it goes. And then we're still doing it and we enjoy it, to our surprise, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't know if this was going to be something that we would continue or how successful it would be. And we think we have 50 episodes now, right, Tristan?
Where I'm editing the 51st right now. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That 50 mark is good. I would say your show is really fun. Having listened to a couple of episodes, you guys have a great rapport, like I think Jen and I do. But I think that's part of it. And maybe that's part of why you guys are still going at it. Do you think that that's part of it?
Definitely. I mean, Tristan and I have worked together for over a decade now. And I think we read each other's thoughts quite frequently. Apparently, we also order the same thing for lunch. I think our dynamic works really well. We know each other well enough and we know the subject matter well enough that we can bounce things off each other pretty easily.
Yeah, I would not be doing this on my own. I need someone to bounce ideas off of and get something different than what I come up with on my own and someone to talk to. Typically, we'll record face-to-face, and that's a pretty big deal for us. I know it's not feasible for everybody, but it certainly makes a difference for us to be able to do that face-to-face.
It's funny because Neil and I live 5 minutes from each other and we still do a virtual podcast.
Yeah.
There definitely are some advantages, like keeping the audio tracks separate. That's a thing I still struggle with, but yeah.
We built a recording studio in our office, and it was quite the engineering feat. And I will give Tristan most of the credit because he actually designed it. I was just there as manual labor.
We're still tweaking all that. So there's a lot of skills I've had to learn to do this that I did not have before, doing all the production and stuff. I had never done any of that kind of thing before. So it was a bit of a learning curve.
How did you guys decide to do it? Were you just looking across the office at each other one day and you're like, yeah, we should create a podcast together?
We work for an organization that has a bunch of people employed in different places around the state, and we actually share an office. So that's one of the reasons we decided to do it together.
And we really wanted to hit that working adult group because Tristan said we hit the children. We don't hit the children. We do public outreach with children, and we do library programs. Like we're gearing up for our summer reading programs right now, and then we do a lot with the senior citizens. But working age adults, when we're doing our outreach, they're at work. And podcasting is something that not only is it something we can do while we work, but they can listen to it whenever it's convenient for them. And one of the really big benefits is once it's out there for good. So you record it once and then people can continue to listen to it for however long. So I think that's a huge benefit. It's not like a lecture where you have to go and give it 50 million times to reach 50 million people.
Yeah.
Another reason we wanted to do this too is because there is a lot of unethical channels producing content about archaeology out there for anti-science reasons, literally them going out and looting sites for fun and profit. And we've talked to our peers about this too, is archaeologists don't have a voice at the table. And so part of the reason for doing this too is that, get us out there so we are present at least, even in our small way. But that's something we've been trying to push our peers to do a little bit more too.
Well, and also you're busting a myth too, because don't take offenses, but usually people think archaeologists are dry and you guys have such great personalities.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say within the archaeological community, we specialize in interpreting to the public. So, I mean, yes, there are definitely, as in any academic realm or whatever, there's going to be the folks that are kind of dry and don't really understand or know how to speak to the public. And you have to speak to them differently than you would, at a conference full of academics. And we've been trained to do that. And we have a lot of experience doing that. And I think that helps a lot.
Well, speaking of dry, that I love your opening line for each episode, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. That is great. That is such a good way to frame what you're trying to do with this podcast, actually. Have you been using that line off the top since the beginning?
Not since the beginning. Our core idea for this was we wanted to read and talk about books that involve archaeology in some way, but are written for general audiences. So it's something that people in theory could also read, as opposed to the academic reporting and stuff, which your average person's never going to want to pick up. And I don't always want to pick up unless I'm looking for information.
I'm an archaeologist and I don't necessarily want to read those for fun. So
Right. So that tagline came from that original idea, and then us realizing we need something a little more tagline-like. to use.
I think for other podcasters out there, I think something like that off the top is great. It's a really good start to the show. It really sets it off and you can really sort of get a flavor for the show quickly. So I really like your format. It's engaging. Can you give us an insight into how you decided to being focused and discussing books? Because sort of coming from the outset, as I've listened to a couple of episodes, it feels very conversational. But how did you land on that structure and format?
I think it just came about organically. We wanted it to be like a discussion, the two of us as professionals talking about this book that wasn't necessarily written for professionals. With a book, you have a natural flow too, right? You have chapters and you can go chapter by chapter, and that's what we try to do. And we've discussed doing different segments and things like that, but we haven't really instituted any of that. And I don't know, now that we're talking, I'm like, wait, do we want to? Because it sounds like it's working. So I don't know if we want to tweak it too much.
And that's the thing we've always done too, is we're constantly trying to figure out better ways to structure things and better ways to reach audiences. Some skills I haven't necessarily come to the table with is how to, format a title and thumbnail for YouTube so that people will engage with it. Those sorts of things we have to learn that we don't necessarily get trained in, but there's plenty of resources out there that, can help guide us and get us started on this stuff. The Podfest Expo actually gave us a fair number of ideas that we've been implementing, and we've been seeing good results so far.
I think something we try to keep in mind is maybe somebody will read the book, but we want it to be interesting to people that won't read the book as well. I mean, hopefully they do pick up the book. That's one of the goals. It would be great if they read along with us. But if they don't, we want them to still be able to understand what we're discussing.
I will say we've had a couple books we don't recommend, but otherwise we want them to read the book.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I love it because, again, we said this topic could be kind of dry. And like for me, my only idea of like fun archaeologists is that old TV show called Relic Hunter, where she like goes and finds all the items. So I'm glad that you guys are bringing archaeology to people like myself who might not understand it.
And that's our goal. I mean, that's our goal as our job as a whole. And then this is an extension of that.
The default for a lot of academic podcasts is to interview people. So get on other academics, other scholars, and interview them. Versus your approach, you're covering a topic and you're doing your job of educating, but just in a different way. Is it time consuming, do you think, more than an interview would be? Because you got to read the book and you got to prep yourself. I think that.
So we actually do read the books and, we're reading them with an intent to discuss them. So it takes a little bit longer because you're taking notes and trying to link back to other previous books you've read when you can. We might research articles that are related to it for further reading. So it is a little bit more work, which I think is one of the reasons a lot of people default to the interview, because I like to read
It still
personally.
works, to be clear. I'm sure it's
still work, but it's a lot of work. But I think it does give us a niche, that is a little bit different. And I understand not everybody is a bookworm, but I think we try to make our discussion interesting enough that people who have no intention of reading the book will still want to kind of tune in and listen to us, hopefully.
That's the interesting part for me. As you said about 5 minutes ago, you're making the assumption that a number of listeners will not actually read the book, but you're using the book as the tool for the education and to dive into a topic.
It lets us talk about some aspects of archaeology from a professional perspective. So, how does the book handle this aspect of archaeology? Does it do it well? Is it doing it poorly? Is this accurate to reality? So it allows us to really have some fun conversations about this stuff.
One of the funny comments we've gotten is that people really enjoy the podcast when we don't like the book, because we get on our little soapboxes and start pretty much preaching about how horrible this book is and why.
We've gotten worked up a couple times, but we don't want to read bad books all the time because we don't actually enjoy reading those books.
I remember going to school and you would buy the Coles Notes version of the book, but it was a book based on the book that you had to read in school, but it was like they just did a quick summary of all the things you need to know. And this is kind of like what you're doing, but in a more modern form. If you're a student or even if you're someone interested in this topic, you can get the gist of it before having to read the actual book.
We have read a couple books that I know are common for students to read, and we do see a little bump around the first of the semester sometimes. So I think that definitely some people are using it that way.
But that's not the intention. You're not just summarizing a book. As you've said, you're digging into it. No pun intended, or maybe pun intended.
Go for the pun. It's fine.
You're in some cases questioning the science from an archaeology perspective.
The science and the ethics.
Ethics is a big one because one of the things people think of with archaeology is it's just in the past. But in reality, our world today is informed by that past and it affects people today. It affects descendant communities. And so some of the books we've dealt with where we've had our most issues is how descendant communities have been treated by the people involved. I won't even necessarily say the archaeologists sometimes, but yeah.
I want to just sort of keep drilling into the mechanics of your podcast, as this is other podcasters out there listening. One of the other things that really struck me about your show is the branding. The name is clever. Cover art is great. You actually gave me, when we met in person at Podfest, you gave me a sticker, the Archaeology Books for Fun, which is the cover art. I've actually had it on my desk since we met. So it's working. It's really good. How did you come up with the name? And then also now how you're using the cover art for your episode art. And I see you've weaved it into a video format as well too, but it's really good. It's fun. Maybe you can sort of dig into that for us, please. Oh, I keep going with that pun again.
It's okay. I think it's the most appropriate pun.
We use it. It's fine.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So we wanted a name that kind of told people what it was about, what the intention was.
And I remember a discussion about, there's a lot of book club style podcasts, but we wanted archaeology to be what set us apart from all of those. And I remember having a discussion about the word archaeology and where we wanted to place it within the title. And I think we went back and forth.
Big word.
Yeah, it's not always an easy word to use either.
No, right.
So
visually and spoken, obviously. So.
It's so long for thumbnails as well. And even in the search engines, it's just long. How else do you pair something with it? But you guys did a great job.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into the cover art, because if you look at it, you've given the word fun more real estate. You've emphasized that. So that was an obvious sort of choice there too.
Yeah. Emphasize fun over what you would maybe expect archaeology to be. It's about, not taking it, well, I don't know, we take it pretty seriously, but we laugh and we joke about things. And it's not just the dry academic idea. It's what we wanted to tell a public audience.
I think that's really important, because I think a lot of archaeologists and probably a lot of academics in general, they will give a lecture to the public the same way they would to a group of professionals. And so we really wanted to emphasize the fact that this was not necessarily, archaeologists can listen. We would love to have archaeologists listen, but they're not our intended audience.
Why? Because they're not fun?
They're a lot of fun, but
they're already convinced. We don't need to convince them.
Yeah. I like the little spheres that you have as your little hosts on the mic. How did you decide that?
Well, the graphic is all stuff I did, and it's based off of my office, actually. And I have limited artistic skills, so I went for as simple as I could visually. And then I knew I couldn't do like a caricature or anything, so I asked Barbara what shape she wanted.
And I was like, what did I say, Tristan? I
think you Googled what's the most complicated shape.
And I said that to Tristan.
I was picturing triangle, square, but no, we got whatever that is. And so that's how they happened. But talking about branding, we do have a little bit of an issue with them, because a lot of people see those shapes and they think Dungeons and Dragons. We've actually gotten some feedback that that is actually a thing. So we might need to rethink rebranding at some point and changing that up to try and differentiate us a little bit more, because it doesn't exactly communicate what we're trying to do with the podcast visually. So it's a thing we might need to address.
At first I was like, is this like rocks because of like archaeology? I was like, do you see yourselves as rocks? I don't know. I was getting way too into it, but
nope. The real story is a lot simpler.
One thing we learned at the Podfest Expo, everybody was like, don't put a microphone in your logo. Everybody knows you're a podcast. So we might need to look at changing that as well.
I think in our case, what we're trying to do is communicate that the shapes are the hosts. I think not necessarily successfully, but that's why we did that. But yeah, it was always the plan from the start to do a video version of this too, because we have a YouTube channel. And so I just found a nice little tutorial actually on how to do the pop filters around the shapes whenever you're talking. And then I'll work in some images and stuff when they're relevant, or when it's not like human remains or something that we can't share.
This is what I tell people with podcasting is your topic doesn't necessarily have to be visual, even if you're doing video or not.
It's true.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Podfest. You mentioned a few minutes back that you found it quite valuable and you learned a bunch. What are some of those things that you picked up while you were there and you've been implementing into your show since?
I'd say we had been running for a couple years. We were doing monthly for quite a while because we didn't know what we were in for, essentially. And then we've switched to twice a month, and we were looking for ways of reaching more audiences. And we had been making some changes throughout that had some effect, but a few of the things that really seem to make a big difference is titles that spark curiosity, thumbnails that go along with it, and then we have like maybe a 6 to 8 second teaser right at the start of the episode. I shortened all that too. So all that seems to have had an effect, and we are seeing Spotify actually push us every once in a while and everything. So that's been good to see go up.
Yeah, seriously. It's a lot of work to podcast, so it's nice to see those numbers increase. But one of the things we also learned was making your thumbnail kind of stand out. And one of the things that we did, I remember we were sitting at lunch or dinner at the Podfest, and we went through and just searched on Spotify Book Hub podcasts to see what their thumbnails looked like. And a lot of them, they use like flowing cursive and pastel or lighter colors because they're definitely marketing towards women, it seems. But ours is a little bit different in that we're academic, but not academic. And so we wanted to make sure that our thumbnail stood out amongst the book club style podcast, and ours does, but that wasn't necessarily intentional. One of the things we've learned is to make sure that when you're looking at your colors and fonts and things like that, you want to stand out.
We looked at history and archaeology podcasts similarly. They use a lot of subpoena colors and that kind of a thing. So having the bright colors that we have in ours does help us stand out.
I think that's a really good takeaway that a lot of podcasters overlook is looking at your competitive set, not just from a format perspective, but visually, how do you stand out in the platforms? I would encourage podcasters to go look at your show in each of these platforms. And I like that lens that you put on it, which was, are we standing out? Or are we differentiating from our other quote unquote competitors?
Yeah. So you have to have your content, of course, for your podcast, right? But one of the things that we aren't necessarily trained to do is how do we package that content? And so that is a thing that we've been talking about. We are still trying to figure out and we're still developing.
Yeah, it is a ever evolving thing. I don't think you ever get to the perfect state. I like this notion of kind of looking at it as you go and evolving it, your format, your content, but also your visual version of your content. So I think that's a really good takeaway.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of people just look at their numbers, but do you guys actually look into what episodes people are watching the majority of and then being like, well, okay, maybe these set of episodes are more in the topics that people want to hear and build your strategy off of that?
A little bit, yeah. We love looking at the numbers.
I might too much.
But I think, we look at what the book was discussing for those specific episodes that were doing really well, what might be going on in current news or issues, and, if that's affecting them. And for one of our books, we did Hoofbeats, it's about the archaeology of horses and humans and our interactions throughout time. And we've noticed after that book, we're hitting a younger demographic and a lot more women. And so, we're currently talking about what to do for our next book and how do we piggyback off of that to grow our audience.
We didn't do this intentionally, but we did decide probably a fiction murder mystery was about the best next book we could have done. That's what we're doing right now. So it seems to be sustaining pretty well at the moment, which is nice.
That artwork on the last one, there's like a house on fire.
Yeah.
I was like, this makes me want to watch it.
Good. That's the intent.
And it's fine because when I think archaeology books, I don't think about murder mystery.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of, or at least good fiction out there when it comes to archaeology but Mariana Evans, the author for this particular book series, she does a phenomenal job. We actually had the opportunity to interview her, and she was telling us about the research she did and things. And it was really nice to be able to bring her on and get some behind the scenes because we both really enjoyed that book.
Well, and she's real clever with it too, because archaeology and crime scene analysis share a lot of the same techniques. And so it makes sense for an archaeologist to be involved in these murder mysteries. We don't usually do fiction on our podcast, but it's been a nice change up from the heavier nonfiction sometimes to stop and do that.
And your audience so far seems like it. They're not like, oh, why are they doing fiction?
Haven't complained, so. Well,
That's good.
even though it's fiction, we're still talking about our experience in archaeology. We're still bringing real world experiences. This is definitely a thing that happened in the field. We just had one where there's always the person on the crew that's the talker, right? And that's a thing that's represented in the book. And then there's, every once in a while, there's one that's, this is not what we would actually see probably, or sometimes you do it for the narrative, that's fine. But it gives us stuff to talk about. So,
Well, it's the beauty of the format of your show is you can branch off into fiction kind of a thing. So that's great. So maybe we just pull back a little bit. As you mentioned, your focus is really that public outreach and education. Where do you see podcasting fitting into that broader mission going forward? Do you see this as an opportunity for other academics who are in a similar public outreach education role? What have you learned along the way? I'm sure you've picked up a few things that really work for that broader mission that you're part of.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits to podcasting is you put it out there once and people can continue to listen to it. I mean, we've seen even some of our very early episodes grow in listenership. So it does work. So there's that benefit. And additionally, you're hitting that demographic that can be hard to reach with public outreach. I mean, they're working, they have young families, they're busy, but guess what? They have a commute, so they can listen on their commute. So we're meeting them where they are, essentially, rather than asking them to come and put one more thing on their calendar that they have to do. And I think that's really helpful. And I think in any academic study, I think getting the public involved too is really important, even if you don't do public outreach as part of your job, because a lot of our funding comes from public sources, and having the public understand what you're doing makes it easier to potentially get funding. It also makes it easier for people to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think a lot of times we see something on the news. I know I've seen this where there was a study being done and people are like, well, that's stupid. Why do we need to know something as mundane as that? But then the podcasting gives you a chance to discuss how you can use that information in the real world and know how it's benefiting the public. And I think that's really important.
it's a similar situation to archaeology. You're not necessarily worried about destruction of sites in other fields, but does your discipline have a voice at the table? Are you being heard, or is it just the critics being heard, or just the pseudoscientists being heard? So that's definitely valuable, I think, to all sciences that way.
That's a really good insight, especially in the podcasting space, which has a lot of loud voices, especially pseudoscience. I think that is this larger opportunity academics and scholars have to join the conversation, if you will. It's this open source thing that you can just start putting it out there and you can have a direct voice. You know, we have to have our eyes wide open in that it's going to be hard to compete against some of these really big, huge shows. But at the same time, this is your opportunity to put out your direct voice and to be part of the discourse.
Yeah, because if not, then you're just letting them control the discourse entirely.
I think that's great. I think it's a good kind of close to our conversation. I think there's a lot of really good insights for fellow higher education podcasters here. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Jen, that was another amazing episode. And just like the title says, fun, I got to say, I really enjoyed that conversation. And the one thing that really struck me was Tristan's point about archaeologists, or actually sort of more academia broadly. If you aren't part of the conversation, then other voices are going to shape the conversation. And really, I think it's a call to action for higher education folks to join the conversation. And they did such a great job of explaining how podcasting for them, and then this specific format that they've adopted and they use, has given them that ability to join the conversation and to be part of the conversation, to dispel some of the things out there that are just wrong about archaeology and archaeologists.
And I like the fact that we're just seeing more and more in general. We've talked to other podcasts in the past like the one from Yale where they talked about art books. I love that books are being included into podcasts because I think that's something that people didn't think was going to happen. And the fact now that it's opening us up to diverse topics, I think it's really cool.
That's great. Well, Jen, why don't you read us out?
Thank you for tuning in to the Continuing Studies Podcast, a podcast for higher education podcasters. We hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, we encourage you to follow it. And thank you for tuning into the Continuing Studies Podcast, a podcast for higher education podcasters. We hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, we encourage you to follow and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform so you never miss an episode. But if you found this episode particularly valuable, please consider sharing it with your friends and colleagues who also might be interested in higher education podcasts. We also invite you to join your peers on higheredpods.com, where you can connect with other podcasters in higher education and learn from others in the field. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to continuing to bring you valuable insights and conversations around higher education podcasts. See you in the next episode.